Says, I pulled the suspect over for speeding him because he matched the description of a suspect of an earlier crime. I asked him to provide identification, and then he appeared apprehensive and nervous. He glared at me with malice before moving. He jerked towards something black and shiny I feared for my life. I fired 4 bullets into the car. I radioed in and waited for backup and emergency responders. The suspect was non-responsive as he was rushed to the hospital. I followed all procedure. Michael's wife says he didn't know where his ID was. You can't see her tears. She has promised they will not see her cry. She is bathed in her tears and her body feels empty after. There is a hole where love used to be, but there are no more tears to shed. He always forgot his ID, she says. But he was just on his way to the gym after a long day at work and teaching. He liked to run. I didn't like him to run at night, not in his gym clothes, not a black man. I didn't even like him running in broad daylight. I used to tell him, don't go outside at all. It's a terrible thing to refer to somebody you love in past tense because I still feel him, still hear his laugh, and smell his cologne. I feel his touch. But he was murdered. And the cop says he feared for his life. She takes a deep breath. I remember when I fell in love with him. He had a rough life, and he built walls around him, fortified them with anger and solitude. It took me years to scale those walls. The work was hard but rewarding, and the higher I climbed, the more I understood. But one night, I dropped him off at home. He loved cats. I think he had 3 or 4, but there was one outside of his door that night, and he picked it up so gently and held the cat to his chest. For a moment, I saw all of his pain disappear. He told me he'd lived in 15 different apartments in a couple of years, and we'd drive around and he could say, I used to live here, anywhere we were in the city. And it all disappeared when he held his pet. Then I knew I could make it over that wall. The thing that hurts most after all of this is that Michael would feel guilty if he ran over a squirrel. He'd randomly ask about it for days after. Do you think the squirrel had a husband or wife or children? I wonder if the cops will worry about our children as much as Michael worried about his squirrels. To think anybody could be afraid of Michael rings hollow. It's like telling your children the dog went to a farm, telling your spouse really there's nothing wrong. He was murdered, and now there are fewer good men in the world, fewer good fathers. I used to live to hear his laugh, and nobody ever will again. On CNN, Don Lemon argues with 4 talking heads, a white police officer explaining the shoot was justified. A blonde white woman is nodding in agreement. Listen, Don, the police officer says, when you're on the streets, you don't know what you'll run into. The suspect could have had anything. And Don Lemon interrupts. He shakes his head and his hand at the same time, signifying he is out of time and patience. He has 0 shits left to give. All of the shits he had to give, he gave away after Donald Trump got elected. He gave them all away to white people, hoping they'd use them to give a fuck about black people. He reached for his wallet, Lemon says. The cop, the skin on his face slipping down by the weight of his apathy, shrugs, as if the death of this man had the significance of an appointment being canceled. And the white woman, who looks manufactured as if she has just come from an assembly line programmed with talking points. She looks like Eurocentric beauty. And for some, the blonde hair, the glossy lips, the blue eyes hide the evil that comes from her mouth. When she speaks, it's almost musical. At the end of the day, the Barbie says, the police officer just wants to get home, same as anybody else. Lemon throws down a pencil. His voice is coated with anger. It sounds like he cannot choke down. It sounds like a cough he cannot choke down. I can't talk about this anymore, he says. We'll be back after this. But the next day, CNN offers up differing views, and they repeat the same thing, acting as if their outrage is an excuse to give hatred and ignorance a space to propagate. On Fox News, they show a picture of Michael from 20 years ago. He wears a shirt 3 times too big for him. He can swim in the blue jeans. The backdrop could be from the set of Friday or Boys in the Hood, because there is no profile for him to have. For some reason, all old poor houses in black neighborhoods look the same. They say a lot of words on Fox News, but it all means the same thing. He was a large man who twitched. He was no angel. And Justice and Michael, they both say the same thing.